to play. You keep me company. Do you feel ashamed of living with my taste? The pleasure in your thighs, it makes me feel alive. I don't wanna kiss, just bite me on my lips. Love to turn me and leave me wanting more of your infection. Fall in love endlessly, twisting chemicals inside your mind. Let it go. The secrets that you own and things you'll never show. You're hiding from a ghost that wants to take you home. Fall in love endlessly, twisting chemicals inside your mind. Let it go. Float away.
Hey, this is Jack, host of the show. When I was a teenager, When I was a teenager, I went to university and studied computer science. At one point, they gave all the students logins to some central Linux computer. It's where you were supposed to do your schoolwork, like you could use it for file storage or check email there and do programming. Well, when they gave me my username and password, they said my username is my last name and my password is just my first and last name. And I instantly realized this means if you know another student's full name, you know their username and password and can log in as them and read their emails and look through their files and stuff. And I told that to the teacher. Hey, this is a bad password policy. He's like, why? I'm like, because I know everyone's password. He's like, yeah, well, everyone should be changing their password. I'm like, yeah, but they're not. None of them are changing their passwords. I tried helping a few students change their password, but I knew it was a lost cause. You could pretty much pick any computer science student in the school, and there was a pretty good chance that you could log in as them if you just knew their first and last name. Well, while I was sitting in class one day, the school sysadmin came into the class and he pointed at me and he motioned for me to follow him to the hall. So I go into the hall and he starts telling me someone has broken into our Linux computer and is going around deleting a bunch of student files and data and stuff. And some students lost a ton of work from this. I was like, well, it wasn't me. I don't know anything about that. I've never done that. But this guy was giving me a crooked look. He's like, come on, fess up. I know it was you. I was like, no, it wasn't. Why are you blaming me? What makes you think I did this? He's like, come on, man. I've seen your command history. You're way more active on that computer than anyone else. And the commands you're doing show me that you know way more than any other student too. So it had to be you. There's literally no other suspects. And I'm like, I promise you, I did not do anything bad on your system, but you have really terrible default passwords and the students are not changing them. And he was like, whatever, dude. Look, if it happens again, you're getting suspended. And I started to realize if whoever did that again, I might get kicked out of school for that. And this made me super worried. I was being wrongfully accused. But I was lucky that they either found the guy who did it or he never did it again because I never saw that sysadmin again. These are true stories from the dark side of the internet. I'm Jack Resider. This is Darknet Diaries. 2019 is when you got arrested, right?
Yeah, correct. In April 11.
All right, so let's go back before that. First of all, tell me your name and what were you doing before that?
Okay, so my name is Ola Bini. I'm from Sweden originally, but I've lived in London and Chicago and here in Ecuador, where I'm still located since 2013 when I came to Ecuador.
When did you leave Sweden?
So I left Sweden in 2007 because I was hired by an international software development company called Dotworks, and I worked for them for 10 years, and that's how I came to Ecuador originally. I came with the company.
What's your preferred programming language?
That's a hard question since I've developed my own programming languages. And of course, I like my own programming languages a lot, but I'm pretty old school when it comes to the history of programming languages. So I'm a huge fan of Common Lisp, and I'm still a proud Emacs user, and I have my millions of lines of Emacs Lisp code to customize my experience.
Millions, geez. Are you a big Java fan?
See, that's a funny question because when I got my first job, I started working in Java, and I was very frustrated with Java from a productivity perspective. So I got involved in creating other languages for the JVM. So I first was involved in a Lisp variant called Jita, and then I got involved in JRuby, which is basically a project to create a Ruby implementation that runs on top of the JVM, and I became one of the core developers for JRuby, and that's kind of what I did for the next few years. The idea was basically to use all the good stuff that is in the Java platform without actually having to deal with the bad stuff, which is, in my opinion, the Java language.
Fascinating. Java always marketed itself as usable on any device or operating system, making it so you can program something once and it'll run anywhere, as opposed to making different apps for different operating systems. However, the language itself is clunky and ugly. So Ola took the beauty he saw in the Ruby programming language and got it to work in Java somehow. It's kind of mind-bending to me that you could code something in Ruby and it'll run anywhere Java can, but this is a kind of audacious project that Ola enjoys working on. He likes to work on huge projects that are pretty obscure and strange. He spent decades as a programmer working for various companies in various countries, and besides having a love for programming, he's also got a burning passion for online privacy.
If you look back in the key servers for GPG, you will find my first GPG key uploaded in 2001 or 2002 or something like that. So privacy was something that I was always interested in, and from my first job, I was involved with cryptography and that kind of stuff. In 2010, WikiLeaks started releasing the diplomatic cables, and so my interest and my activity kind of started coming back in that time. But then I had my regular day job, and I didn't really get super engaged until the beginning of 2013 because that was when actually, it was an event where a friend of mine named Aaron Swartz. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so he killed himself in the beginning of January of 2013, and that was a huge blow to me, and it was a huge blow to many people inside the company because he worked with us. And we started talking about how we wanted to do more from a privacy perspective, from a digital advocacy perspective, and all these things. So in 2013, I kind of started out working on those things, and I started out doing both. And I really was doing both privacy and information security at the same time.
So what was your involvement with WikiLeaks? Did you actually work with them?
No, and that's the thing. Like, I've been accused of working for WikiLeaks for a long time, but that's not true. I never worked for WikiLeaks in any way. But I am a friend of Julian Assange, and that's what came in 2013 because I was doing all this work, reaching out to privacy networks and talking to people around the world, and then a friend in common who was the lawyer for Julian recommended to Julian that I should meet Julian. So it was pretty funny. It was a week before the Snowden disclosures. I went to London and I went to the Ecuadorian embassy, and I met Julian and we became friends. And then since then, I was traveling a lot, and every time I was in Europe, I passed by London and I went to the embassy to hang out with him and just talk about technology or privacy or all these things. But we were only friends. We were never collaborators or working together in any way.
It's interesting. Julian was in the Ecuadorian embassy, and Ola had just moved to Ecuador from the United States.
I was in a very privileged position because my company basically told me I could go wherever I wanted, that the company had offices, and I could work from anywhere. So I could have moved to India, I could have moved to China, to Australia. But at the same time, there was this discussion about opening up an office because the company at that point had offices in Brazil, but nowhere else in Latin America. And I had a wife at the time, and she was interested in learning Spanish. So we were thinking about, okay, Latin America could be interesting. And then the company decided that Ecuador would be the place, and we went and we liked it. So we went there. And everyone always asks if there was any connection with what Julian went through, but actually it was complete coincidence that I ended up in the same country as Julian was in the embassy of.
Julian Assange was in trouble because his website, WikiLeaks, had published some sensitive articles, which exposed things like governments that were doing things that they didn't want us to know about, and they wanted to arrest him for exposing this stuff. So he was granted asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London because Ecuador looked favorably upon him, but he couldn't leave the embassy because the UK and the US didn't like him, and they wanted to arrest him. So Julian Assange was stuck there, like on a little island, that if he stepped off of, the UK police would swoop in on him and arrest him.
Oh yeah, no, it was crazy. I mean, of course, he didn't have so many friends, so that could come and visit him. So that was one of the reasons why I kept doing it. To like sitting in that situation that he was in, like being alone like that. Like if I were in that situation, I would like for people to come and hang out and just have friends that you can talk to in different ways. So I met him the first time in the first week of June 2013, and then just a few days later came the first Snowden disclosures, and the whole world blew up and started talking about privacy and all this stuff.
Yeah, it's true. Once the Snowden papers became news, the world started talking about privacy a lot. See, it's against the law for the US to do mass surveillance on its own citizens, but the Snowden papers showed that through the PRISM Project and others, the US government was doing mass surveillance on its own US citizens. It was awful for them to be doing that without consent, without approval, without the citizens knowing it's happening. So tons of people were suddenly talking about privacy then. And of course, all this made Ola realize you can't trust the infrastructure that our communication is going over. There's entities in the world trying to suck up all the data they can and look in everyone's packets. So it's incredibly important to do end-to-end encryption on everything. So only you and the person you're talking to can see what's being said. See, with email, for example, typically the email provider can open and read all the email they want. If the police get a search warrant, they can ask the email provider for full readable emails. So Ola started working on tools which would restrict the email provider from being able to see emails. Even if someone put a gun to the email provider's head, they wouldn't be able to hand over readable emails. It would just be encrypted gibberish. He made it so that the sender and receiver would exchange encryption keys. This means the email gets encrypted upon hitting send and only decrypted when the receiver opens it. Nobody else will ever get to see what's in it.
We were also doing our own development. We created a chat platform, a chat tool called Koyayam.
And this also had end-to-end encryption built in and was very privacy focused. Because most of the popular chat apps then, and surprisingly still today, are not end-to-end encrypted. So these chat services can read anyone's messages, and so can the governments of the world. Or hackers, if they can get into the systems. As you can see, privacy is very important to Ola.
I use the definition of privacy, which is based on the idea of control. Privacy is the capacity for you to control the information about yourself. So privacy is not about hiding, although hiding can be one of the things you do with privacy. Privacy is controlling what information you want to release, to whom you want to release it, under what circumstances, etc. For me, privacy is important. Well, it's important because it's a human right, and that should be enough. But it's also very important because it's very, very closely linked to other rights. For example, if you're a person that believes in democracy, then you should believe in privacy, because there's been a lot of studies that show that people under surveillance vote in a different way than if they're not under surveillance. So if you want to have free and proper elections, then you need privacy for people, for example. So in my perspective, the important thing about privacy is that it enables all these other rights. And the problem is that privacy in the physical world, privacy has always been quite hard to violate in a massive way. It's not like you can have a person just standing at the window of 100,000 people. I mean, if I remember correctly, the Stasi in East Germany, I think at some point 4% of everyone was working as an informant for the Stasi. 4% of the population, but they still weren't able to in any way invade the privacy of most people with that amount of people. But of course, in the technological world, the possibility for violation is extreme, and that's what we're seeing. Like every year, like the privacy invasions are becoming larger and larger.
Since 2013, Ola has been vocal about this, blogging about it on WordPress, working with others, building tools to enhance our privacy, and trying to be a privacy activist. His job allowed him to build privacy tools while working there, but that company he was working at got bought out by a private equity company, and he knew he wasn't going to be able to work on those tools anymore with that new leadership.
So I quit, and a few of the other people quit as well, and we started a non-profit here in Ecuador. Well, actually, we started first in Brazil and in Barcelona, but then in 2019 we moved the non-profit to Ecuador.
This non-profit was entirely focused on privacy.
So this is a non-profit called Centro de Autonomía Digital, and the Digital Autonomy Center, you can call it in English. It's based here in Ecuador. We work to create free software that protects the privacy for people at risk, and specifically we try to work from a context of Global South more than Global North, because a lot of the tools that exist are done for white people in Europe and the United States, and we know that being in Ecuador, for example, we have contacts with a lot of nonprofits that work here, and a lot of the indigenous groups, and all these kind of situations that are quite complicated, and many of the tools are not really made for them, not in the right language, not with the right usability, not for the right circumstances. So we work on free software.
They built a chat app and email privacy tools and a teleconferencing tool.
The software development is a big part, but the other big part is that we do public education about security and privacy, and this is directed towards the communities of civil society to try to help them to have better practices and so on. Because a lot of them, a lot of the people that work in civil society, they get money to do projects to help people, and they often don't have time to think about their security practices.
In May of 2018, when a new president took office in Ecuador, everything changed. We're going to take an ad break here, but stay with us because this story is about to go off a waterfall.
So the new president, his name is Lenin Moreno. He came in 2018, and when he came into power, everyone thought that he would be kind of from the same political alignment as the previous government, which was headed by President Rafael Correa. But when Lenin Moreno came into power, he basically cut ties with Rafael Correa and the whole movement of Correistas, as they are called, and he basically started investing for corruption, and he made a lot of moves towards industry and going into a right-wing kind of direction. So everyone was quite surprised.
And with this sudden change in political alignment, in 2019, the new president, Lenin Moreno, suddenly wasn't happy with Julian Assange and no longer was willing to give him asylum.
I was actually on my way to the airport when all of this happened. So basically, I'm a martial artist, and at the time I was practicing something called Bujinkan. And a few months earlier, I had received my black belt, and I was planning to go to Japan. And the idea was to go to Japan to train with the Grandmaster that still teaches in Japan for this martial art. So I had publicized the fact. I had the tickets bought months before. And early on the morning of the 11th, on the Thursday, I received a message from a few of my friends telling me about what had happened.
The foreign minister and the interior minister of Ecuador had given a press conference that morning, and Ola was watching what they said.
These two people, they were talking about the fact that they had expulsado is the word they used, but that they had thrown out Julian because he was collaborating with enemies of the state inside of Ecuador. And what they were saying in this press conference was that they also had evidence that there were 2 Russians living in Ecuador that were key members of WikiLeaks, and that they were also part of this attempt to destabilize the government.
And just like that, Julian was under arrest in the UK. After having asylum for 7 years, he lost it, and the UK police swooped in on him and took him to jail. It was shocking for the world to see that Julian Assange was arrested.
I saw this press conference, and I didn't really think anything about it, so I continued my preparations for my travels. I was going to leave at 12 midday and get to the airport, so that's what I did.
So he goes through the airport, through security, arrives at his gate, sits down, and reads a book. Then he hears an announcement. Well, Ola Bini, please come to the gate. He goes up to the gate, and they wanted to check his luggage for some reason.
And this is pretty common, that they ask you to go down to where they manage the luggage and go through it because they're looking for drugs. So that's something that always happens with these trips. So I went there and I had no idea. And when I stood there, about 10 different people came up to me, and they were trying to explain to me that they wanted to apprehend me.
Apprehend him? He's like, me? Why? What did I do?
These people, they didn't identify themselves. They didn't have any markings on them saying that they were police or who they were. And I was quite confused. At that time, I didn't really speak Spanish well, so I was trying in English to understand what was happening. And they were saying that they were stopping me from going on the airplane and that I needed to come with them. At this point, I had no idea why.
There was a moment where he was able to sneak his phone out, text a friend, hey, I'm in trouble. I think I'm being arrested. I need a lawyer immediately. I'm at the airport. And they took him into a little room, and he looks at the sign on the room. It says Interpol.
And then they set me down there. They asked me to put my things away from me, but they still let me keep my phone for some reason. So I was still in contact, and I managed to get hold of the lawyer, and he said he was coming towards the airport to be there. But at that point, after about 10 minutes inside of this room, the person there asked me to put my phone away, that I was not allowed to have the phone, and that I needed to put the phone away for my own safety. I had no idea what he meant by that, but basically I had to put the phone on the table. And from that point, I wasn't allowed to touch the phone anymore. All of this was a little bit confusing because no one tried to talk to me about what was happening, and I kept asking, hey, what's going on, what's happening? And they basically didn't say anything. It was also complicated because the person keeping me in this office, he didn't speak in English. So when I wanted to ask questions, he had to go out and get someone from the immigration department that was out in the airport to come back and to talk to me in English. So they didn't really have a translator or anything like that to talk to me at all. And that basically was how I spent the next few hours.
Hours spent in the Quito airport in this little room. He missed his flight at this point, and he has no clue why he was being detained. They weren't asking him questions, and they weren't giving him answers. They just kept him in a room with a guy there who didn't speak any English to watch over him. Eventually, someone comes in and tells him they're taking him to the city, and they escort him to a car, and they put him in a car, and they start to drive off, but then they change their mind and take him back to the airport and send him into that little Interpol room again. He asks if he can call his lawyer, and they let him, but only for like 1 minute.
At that point, this is the most ridiculous thing. At this point, the guy that was holding me there, he held up a paper in front of me and said that this was the reason I was being held. Now, this paper he held up for 5 seconds, and I couldn't see anything except that my name was badly written, and it said Russo. So this whatever thing they had said Russian, and they had the wrong name on it, or misspelled name on it. And he held it up to me when I was talking to my lawyer, and then he hid it again, and I wasn't allowed to see